Another day, another hit piece on libertarianism. Well, this one actually came out 2 years ago, but it just came to my desk today. Let's see what this preppy young guy has to say.
Is it that most people don't like libertarians? I mean, the entire stated purpose of their political movement is to maximize liberty. And most people are actually pretty pro-liberty, and yet they still dislike libertarians. So why is this the case?
This is a question I ask myself every day.
I was trying to find an answer to this myself. And I came to the conclusion that most people who call themselves libertarians simply are not libertarians. Anybody who
Exactly. I've been saying this the whole time. None of them are libertarians.
calls themselves
Ask any libertarian, nobody else is a libertarian.
a libertarian, it's useful to think of them as existing in two separate groups. One
Okay, how long before he says fascist?
of which is true libertarianism, and the other of which is not. And I've called them weak and strong libertarianism, the opposite way around. So a weak libertarian would be someone who defends and only cares about defending the liberty of themselves, and they would never stick their neck out to defend the liberty of somebody else. Whereas conversely, a strong libertarian would defend the liberty of somebody else just as strongly as they would defend their own liberty. Perhaps even more strongly, because if they're a capable person who's, they can defend their own selves, then they maybe need to focus even more strongly on defending the liberty of somebody who can't defend it for themselves.
Thank God Ayn Rand isn't around to hear this. She would have a heart attack.
Right? And I think this strong libertarianism, what I'm calling strong libertarianism, was actually how the political ideology was first conceived. And I have two quotes to kind of support that.
He's going to talk about the libertarian socialists, Kropotkin, etc. Proudhon.
The first one being from the U.S. Libertarian Party, from their website, lp.org. It reads,
Swing and a miss.
"We defend each person's right to engage in any activity that is peaceful and honest." So, this idea of defending anybody's right, defending every person's right, is strong. And the second one is from John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, which is kind of like one of the most important founding documents of this idea.
No, I don't think so. Also, I bet he's going to say the only reason why force can be exercised against a member of the community is for the safety of the community itself. No, I don't think On Liberty was one of the most important documents for the libertarian, or at that time, liberal movement. In fact, James Mill was a lot better on liberty than John Stuart, although John Stuart gets more credit. James being John Stuart's father. He was sort of laissez-faire's Lenin, if you will. Very solid, and John Stuart, more of a bit figure, in my opinion, in the liberal movement.
Of libertarianism. So it reads, "The sole end for which mankind are warranted, individually or collectively, in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number is self-protection." So it sounds like he's talking about the individual, but it continues, "that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member
I called it!
of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others." So again, this strong idea of defending the rights of others, right? I think
Sort of, but really it's more setting the limits of state action.
What libertarianism has become is mostly this second type, and that's why it tends to be pretty disliked, because it just comes off as like selfish and not really a good action. It's a good political ideology. It's just really an excuse to not have to do anything. These people are just looking for a way to make themselves morally exempt from having to right wrongs that they perceive in society. If they see somebody else's liberty being
I didn't sign up to any goddamn Cape Crusader.
trampled upon, they want to have a get out of jail free card to say, hey, that's wrong, but I'm a libertarian, so I think everybody should just fend for themselves. And that's where you get this dislike of these libertarians, because they're not true Scotsmen. And examples of types of people that you'd find being this weak kind. First of all is extreme selfish types. This is an ideology I've heard bandied about.
Everyone is perfectly selfish. Let's get real. Who doesn't want to have more stuff, more wealth, more money? Do you want $1 million? Of course you want $1 million. We're all self-interested, selfish.
And it's basically this idea that
let's not deny human nature.
That if everybody focuses only on their own good, then that's the best possible society, and everybody that would maximize happiness is if everyone just focused on themselves. And
I don't know if anybody has that idea. I mean, the beauty of the market economy is that in order for you to prosper, you have to serve others, basically. You have to sell a good they want to buy, or offer a service they want to buy, or sell your labor to somebody who wants to hire your labor. The whole point actually is that not only are you doing things that are good for yourself, you're doing things that are good for yourself and somebody else. Because all interactions in the market economy are mutually beneficial. That's why people trade, because they expect to benefit. So not only are you benefiting yourself, you're benefiting whoever you're trading with. And unlike altruism, this is sustainable because you're making a profit, they're making a profit. It's win-win. And you're interacting with others not as benefactor and recipient, not as master and servant, but as equals that both contribute.
A subset of this would be Ayn Rand types, who, she had this idea of extreme selfishness being a good thing, and it's really just kind of pathetic. Again, another.
Okay, but you're not building an argument against egotism. You're just dismissing it with a pejorative. Well, I think your argument's kind of pathetic, because where is your case against this extreme selfishness that, yes, Rand represented?
Type maybe.
But look, why shouldn't a person pursue their own interests? Why shouldn't a person live for themselves within the bounds of a society of law, so long as you're not using force or coercion against another, which, also core to Rand's doctrine? But why should you put the interests of others above your own? That makes no sense. That's a recipe for unhappiness.
Frat guys, live for the moment types.
But not really. I mean, Rand or any of her heroes couldn't be further away from a frat guy if they tried. I mean, look at, Howard Rourke. Wait. Yeah, look at Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead. I mean, this guy's an architect, a loner, who basically just wants to build his buildings and do so better than anybody else. Is that frat boy behavior? No, I mean, frat boys are, the whole thing about them, and this might be a stereotype that's not entirely true, is they're just partying and wasting their time, having fun, not really doing anything productive. They're indolent, they're hedonistic, and they're basically savages. A lot of the time, they benefit from nepotism, and that couldn't be further from Rand's ideal, which is, somebody who's driven by hard work and wants to be the best. And like you look at in Atlas Shrugged, that railroad lady, I mean, who just wants to build the best railroads or whatever. Like, that's a complete. Do you even have an inkling as to what Rand's ideology was all about? Have you ever read any of her books?
They could probably fit just a weak libertarian type. Just anybody who would use as a crutch this, supposed philosophy, just because it says that I don't have to help anybody else who, I see is in danger, and I'm morally.
But the whole thing is, in the market economy, you do help other people simply by pursuing your own ends. I guess I've already covered this point at length. So.
Justified in doing so. In my inaction, I'm morally justified, right? It's basically.
Now, of course, we're morally justified not helping people. Look, there's millions of starving children in Africa. We all don't help them every day. Are we going to condemn ourselves for that?
An excuse. Lastly,
what does this guy do that makes him such an expert on altruism? You have the soup kitchen 9 hours a day.
Off, I think maybe most pertinently,
ladling out soup
is a weak libertarian could be somebody who is economically well off, and they want to, even though they have the means very, very clearly, maybe even abundantly so, to defend the liberty of others, they want to be morally justified in their inaction, in their not doing anything to help them. And a subset of these people would be maybe.
This guy has such a juvenile view of the world that we've got to be all running around trying to solve. Literally, we have to be superheroes trying to solve people's problems. Like, getting through the day is hard enough, but I'm not going out there to try to save the world. I got to take care of me and mine.
Maybe like Silicon Valley types. I think they really, emphasize at this point because they're into stoicism and they're allegedly into libertarianism, but it's just of this type. It's just that, they've made usually a lot of money doing something, fairly stupid, and they.
What do you mean fairly stupid? Creating products that people use? Again, what have you done? Who are you to judge? Somebody makes money in the market economy, makes millions of dollars in a business. That's the objective expressing of consumers that they value what this person has done. So, I mean, who are you to sneer at people for what they've done, saying it's nothing?
Need to justify not spending their, relatively speaking, easily got.
Why are you telling this Silicon Valley guy how he should spend his money that he earned, which he's already paid absurd taxes on to go, to HUD, to Ukraine, whatever. I mean, isn't it enough that the government already takes probably half of whatever he makes? Now he's got to devote himself to righting all the wrongs of society just to receive the approval of the Leathern Apron Club. I mean, this guy has a lot of nerve. You sir, have a lot of nerve.
Gotten gains on people who need it, on people who, they see are suffering, and in their mind they're suffering because they sort of like this idea of liberty. They just need a way to not have to help them, essentially. So they say, hey, I'm libertarian, everybody should just fend for themselves, right? Now, types of arguments
And that's not what libertarian is. Libertarianism is, it's not everybody should fend for themselves. The market economy is peaceful social cooperation. It's people working in harmony towards our mutual benefit. It's not the law of the jungle. The law of the jungle is the state, okay? Because with the state, you don't have to produce or exchange to obtain wealth. You can simply plunder what another has created. You can take what rightfully belongs to them. So the strong will oppress the weak in that scenario because they're allowed to use force and coercion. In the market economy, you don't have that option. It's criminal. You can only interact with people on terms that they accept, mutually beneficial interaction.
That these weak libertarians would make are things like central banking is fine, and in fact it's good. Central banking where with fiat currency, where people can essentially conjure money up out of nothing and then loan it out to people at interest, right? They would say that, well, it's a win-win situation. The person getting the loan, they got the money they needed, and the banks, they make interest on it.
Hold up. This guy's against central banking? I may have underestimated you, sir.
So, they benefit, and everybody was a willing participant. Therefore, this is a good, I'm a libertarian, right? And of course, if you know anything about banking, you know that they would just be ignoring the massive elephant in the room, which is this is a really backhanded system by which people are making immense profit.
Oh no, he's anti-usury
for no work, and slowly over the decades accumulating, the vast majority of the wealth of a country. They're essentially stealing the wealth of a country.
Say usury.
And this is, necessarily undermining the liberty of everybody in that country.
I mean, no, I think he's wrong. Yes, central banks are a big problem, but I don't think he has the right criticism of them. I don't think he's got the right solution. I'd like to hear more on his views of central banking, because the central bank, obviously, a huge, huge problem. And that's, we should get rid of the central bank because it is inflationary and the cause of the business cycle and all these, and it promotes war and militarism. But I think this clown's just like opposed to banking at all. I'm not certain. Let's hear more.
They, though, don't hold liberty, these weak libertarians, they don't hold liberty as the highest virtue like a libertarian ought to. So they say, everybody was a willing participant, man, it's okay. So they allow injustice like this to take place. They might also, to say quickly, they might also object to people participating in unions. Even if it's a union where, your membership is
pro-union, he's a clown.
Isn't mandatory, and it's completely up to the employee if they want to join. This is an issue where libertarians should say, it's freedom of association. They should be able to do whatever they want as long as they weren't coerced into it.
That's true, and I don't think any libertarian is in favor of banning unions, but I don't have to celebrate them. Unions suck.
But, this and other sort of economic interests,
Am I a weak libertarian?
Sides of economic issues on which the weak libertarian will find themselves sort of underlie their actual thinking, which is, at the base of it, again, it's not that they're holding liberty as the highest virtue. They're kind of more...
You're a left libertarian clown.
Like traditionally neoconservative or just straight out capitalists. And the libertarianism only
Fucking A, I'm a capitalist.
Into their thinking because they want to have, that moral freedom to not help people who they perceive as suffering from injustices, right? So it's just that part of the libertarianism. It's not, they don't accept the whole thing, right? It's more capitalistic or neoconservative, right?
Wrong.
The ultimate irony of these weak libertarians is that they necessarily have to condone, they have to be okay with actions which are anti-liberty, right? Like the banking example. They could be aware that central banking undermines the liberty of an entire country, undermines the liberty of every person in that country, and yet they would be okay with it because they would say, the two willing participants thing, like they were both okay with it and they both benefited, therefore I can't interfere. But if a person holds liberty as their highest virtue, they really ought to interfere. So that's the irony on the weak libertarian side. The irony on the strong libertarian side is this idea that they ought to interfere and they ought to undermine, sometimes, the individual's liberty in order to maximize the liberty of the society, which ought to
Nah, sounds like commie bullshit.
be their goal, it's really myopic and counterproductive to promote the liberty of the one individual, even though you think that 100 years from now.
Okay, Spock. The needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
This could undermine everybody's liberty, and that.
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few,
or the one.
Rip.
It could be completely gone in that time period. If your highest virtue is liberty, you should always defend it, even if it means sometimes doing the whole kill one to save 1,000 thing. So again, we have this idea that strong libertarians ought to sometimes, ironically, interfere with the liberty of others, and this leads,
For example,
to two important questions. One, what if the person that you're saying their liberty is being infringed upon, what if they don't want your help? What if they refuse your help? Well, you can go one of two ways as a strong libertarian here. One, you can say, okay, fine, and you let them do what they were going to do. But I think the problem with this is you essentially just become a weak libertarian again. You put the selfishness of that person and whoever they're engaging in that act with, you put their selfishness above the highest
bro, what are you even talking about?
virtue of liberty, right? So you kind of just end up putting things before what ought to be your highest virtue. Therefore, I think that makes you a weak libertarian. Secondly, if the person doesn't want help, what you can do is help them anyways, right? And then you get this irony of, well, are you still a libertarian because you're just interfering when someone in an action that was between two willing participants, you're interfering and undermining their liberty just because you think it's going to harm the liberty of society down the
Society doesn't exist.
road, right? So that's the first irony of these strong libertarians. And the second question that interfering in an action like this brings up is, how do you judge when someone's liberty is being harmed, right? And you can come up with a lot of fancy answers for this. You can say like committees and certain laws and everything, but those all boil down to being decided by one person. So the thing at the root of how you decide if someone's liberty is being infringed upon is your own judgment. So you have this crazy situation where someone who started off as a libertarian and wants to hold liberty as the highest virtue will necessarily sometimes have to interfere with other people's free actions, and they have to interfere just based on their own subjective judgment, right? It's crazy. So this brings me to this idea that libertarianism, it's really just like this stepping stone ideology where you're going to end up going down one of these two paths, and you're going to become, you're going to start off saying you're libertarian, and then you're going to have to necessarily, an action is going to come up and it's going to present you.
No, you can just let people live their own lives, make their own decisions, and don't have the hubris to think that you can dictate to them how they should live their lives, like you know more about what's going on in their life than they do. This guy's just a naive young punk.
With a path whereby you can choose to become a weak libertarian or a strong libertarian. And if you are a weak libertarian, well then I don't think you're a libertarian because you don't hold liberty as your highest virtue. If you're a strong libertarian, you need to come to grips with this idea that you're going to have to interfere with the liberty of some people at some point, based on your own judgment and against their will. So this...
I'd like to see some reference to specific here. I'm not really sure what he's talking about. I'd like examples. I don't think anything that he's saying is really true. The end.